Good evening. Welcome everybody to Warrant Committee. We have some people here in person, and we also have a couple of people on Zoom. Karen, could you please call the roll?
Yes, we have Tom Caldwell, Steve Rhines is on Zoom, Lori Connolly, Elizabeth Dillon, Jay Fundling, Andrew Coe, Peter Mon, Julia Maxwell, Brian McGuire, and Judy Steele is on Zoom. You have a quorum.
Thank you very much. So again, welcome members of the Warrant Committee and members of the public who are watching. As you can see from our agenda posted, we are very fortunate to have the chair of our Town of Milton Planning Board, Meredith Hall, here to join us to speak just generally about some of the things that the Planning Board is working on this year, as you can see from the agenda, and the work that they're currently doing and that they expect to present to us in the upcoming months as we prepare for the special town meeting in February and also our annual in May. So, Chair Hall, if you could please come up.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you.
And thank you for the invitation to be with you tonight. It's nice to see everybody.
So, Chair Hall, and I know we spoke earlier, so we just kind of set this up. We've had a few other committees before us, town administrator, and we're preparing obviously for a potential special town meeting, as I said, in the fall. So this is just, we're kind of getting to work a little early, just to kind of position everybody to understand what's coming down the pike for town meetings consideration and our comment. So I have an agenda, and there are several items on there. So I give you free rein to address each as you see fit in the order that you think is the best to present.
Great, thank you so much. Yes, because some of these items are potential articles that we are currently working on. We now know after the select board meeting that it will be a February 24th special town meeting, which I think is a realistic goal to get at least 2 items that put forth to the town. The first one, and I'll give you a little background, and please, if you have any questions, you can let me know. The first one that we're currently working on a draft, and hopefully we'll have something to get to town council by the end of this month, potentially, are the amendments to our site plan approval. Site plan approval is something we currently have in our zoning bylaws. Essentially, when you have a project that an applicant comes before us that does not require a special permit, the site plan approval is the way that we look at whether it's setbacks, height, various items that we can control a project. Typically, it's very difficult to deny a project. An example would be under the Dover Amendment, either a school, a preschool application that comes before us, a church application. Those are items that do not require a special permit. A project like 440 Granite, which had a very unusual lot configuration, that did not require a special permit. That was site plan approval. So we're limited right now in what we can do and how we can sort of help to craft what that development is going to ultimately become. Right now, what we have in our site plan review is really just very vague. So it really doesn't help the developer, the applicant. It doesn't help the planning board. It sort of gives us just some vague guidelines. And I think it's really helpful, especially to a developer, to know at the beginning what a town expects as far as the size of a building, the impact that it would, does it have a detrimental effect to the neighbors for various reasons? Are there safety or site, fire, concerns? All those items go into site plan approval. And so that is something that we are updating. We're looking at what other towns have done, and we'll have something, I think, that will be just better for everyone, a little more clear. And that draft, again, will probably go to town council at the end of the month, and then we'll have a draft to get to you as soon as possible. That would be one item. The next item that we are going to be working on is accessory dwelling units. And I know you all have been very familiar with the MBTA and what's been happening with that, which I'll touch on. But for those accessory dwelling units, this is something that actually was signed or passed in the legislature this past summer, and it actually goes into effect February 2nd. The challenge with this, which is not too different from the MBTA zoning, is that HLC will be promulgating the regulations, the Department of Housing, and they will not have their regulations in place by the time when February 2nd comes and ADUs are allowed, and it's by right. So we would like to be prepared to have something. It may be, we may need to amend it later down the line, but at least when out of the gates by February, when people start coming to the building department, applying for an ADU, we have some language that again will, require setbacks, give certain height dimensions, make sure that it's appropriate and that what is being built fits in. And I thought just for those, because this is new, I just wanted to read what an ADU is, because some people are like, what is an ADU? And you hear these things often, can be mentioned. And I just wanted to read this from the state's website. Accessory dwelling unit, a self-contained housing unit inclusive of sleeping, cooking, and sanitary facilities on the same lot as a principal dwelling, subject to otherwise applicable dimensional and parking requirements, that one maintains a separate entrance, either directly from the outside or through an entry hall or corridor shared with a principal dwelling, sufficient to meet the requirements of the state building code for safe egress. It cannot be larger in gross floor area than half the gross floor area of the principal dwelling, or 900 feet, whichever is smaller, and is subject to additional restrictions as may be imposed by a municipality, including but not limited to additional size restrictions and restrictions or prohibitions on short-term rental. And that's an important thing that we'll need to have in there. As defined in Section 1 of Chapter 64G, provided, however, that no municipality shall unreasonably restrict the creation of or rental of an accessory dwelling unit that is not a short-term rental. And then it goes on to say in Section 8, no, and this is very specific to what we are able or not able to do. No zoning ordinance or by law shall prohibit, unreasonably restrict, or require a special permit or other discretionary zoning approval for the use of land or structures for a single accessory dwelling unit or rental thereof in a single-family residential zoning district, provided that the use of land or structures for such accessory dwelling unit under this paragraph may be subject to reasonable regulations, including but not limited to, if applicable, site plan review. So that's where the site plan review also will be able to be applied to the ADUs. Site plan review, regulations concerning dimensional and prohibitions on short-term rental as defined in Section 1 of Chapter 64G. The use of land or structures for an accessory dwelling unit under this paragraph shall not require owner occupancy. So that is very interesting. We cannot control that. Of either the accessory dwelling unit or the principal dwelling, provided that not more than one additional parking space shall be required for an accessory dwelling unit, and provided further that no additional parking space shall be required for an accessory dwelling unit located not more than half a mile from a commuter rail station, subway station, ferry terminal, or bus station. For more than one accessory dwelling unit or rental thereof in a single-family residential zoning area, there shall be a special permit for, that's the only time that a special permit is if somebody's applying to do more than one ADU. In a single-family residential zoning district, there shall be a special permit for the use of land or structures for an accessory dwelling unit. The Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities may issue guidelines or promulgate regulations to administer this paragraph. So essentially, we have to come up with zoning language, and I do believe this is realistic. For those of you who maybe have been on town meeting for a little while or have followed the conversation on ADUs, a lot of work was done by the planning board on ADUs. The board was split at the time on whether it should be by right or by special permit. But the language that there was a lot of really good things that were in the article. It was more the question is, do we want this for our town to be a special permit or by right? We no longer have that decision. It's been made for us at the state level. So we will be working on that. What we can do is make sure that it's not for Airbnb use. We can limit it to one per site. So there are some things that we can do, and then we can include some of our language from site plan approval so that we can ultimately make sure that what is being built, if it's an addition, really fits in with the character of the neighborhood and keeping that consistent. So that would be probably more information, but I just want, if you all start hearing, the conversation around ADUs, and it would really be prudent of the planning board to really be able to present something to you to have for town meeting, to have this, when this legislation, when it becomes active. So the next thing, just to keep you guys going, is the MBTA communities. We can talk about that. The planning board had met about 65 times on looking at various districts extensively. We've really laid the groundwork to the point where we are currently we're waiting for the decision by the AG's office. So we're sort of at a, as much work as we can do right now, and using our resources most wisely. We have a number of districts. We've been rating those. We're going to be having a community forum. But until we know what the decision of the AG is going to be, the decision could be a number of different things that Milton will have to decide. The question is, will they determine if it's an opt-in or if it's required? We'll have to understand if there's a designation as far as will they get into the details of really looking at do we have a subway in the town? But there's a lot of different things that they're going to be looking at. Were the guidelines properly promulgated? That is really a question that they may have to go back and say, you know what, we need to start this process again. So we will know a lot more. We think we'll have a decision by the end of the year, but we're not sure. So it's really the timing of getting an article to town, back to you all in town meeting, really is depending on the timing of the AG. So that, I would say, is not realistic for the end of February, although if we get it next week, possibly. But it really, I would say, look for that maybe for a spring town meeting, likely that we would have something prepared for that.
Can I just,
Sure,
if I could,
yes.
just not, maybe more of a question or comment, but I think essentially the planning board, it seems like is covering all angles. Is that really the approach in terms of?
We've looked at a number of different districts that will be, depending on what we're required to do, or what the town decides to do, there could be different combinations. So we basically have narrowed it down to, okay, this makes sense in this location. This makes sense, for a variety of reasons. We've gone back, and what we've really been looking at is taking units off of zoning for units on Granite Avenue, because that was a real challenge. So if we are required to do a full 25%, that will basically be shifted. And we're looking at some alternative districts, which were not in the Article 1 that town meeting voted for. So we're looking to substitute for those units on Granite Avenue, but different combinations depending on what the AG decides. So.
And just as a follow-up,
Yeah.
in terms of a community forum, would that be obviously after a decision is rendered by the court?
Correct.
But would it be part of a planning board meeting? Would it be something separate? Do you even know?
So it would be after, it would be after the AG, because offers that, provides their decision, and it would be a public hearing. It has to be a public hearing. We did have one that we were thinking that we would have scheduled for tomorrow evening, actually, and it was going to be here. We're going to have here. But we realized we didn't want to raise anxiety levels for people and certain residents in certain districts unnecessarily. So we thought, and we didn't want to just start debating, things that we don't have control over right now. It's really in the AG's hands. So we thought, rather than getting people all worked up unnecessarily, let's wait, let's see what the AG says, and then it will be a sprint, but we'll get it done, and have something, and know how to move forward on that. But it will be open to the public, and it will be well posted, and we'll have more than one public hearing too, because we want to hear feedback from the residents. Everyone's voices need to be heard, so,
That's great, thank you.
yep,
Mr.
okay.
Chair, should we ask questions about this topic?
Yeah,
or wait
if
till-
there's
Sure, yeah,
if there are
feel free
questions
to-
that the chair can answer, please go fire away.
Yeah, if there's anything so far that I've covered, yeah.
Yeah, hi, yeah, this is about the MBTA. So I've not been following the ins and outs. I apologize. I did think that one of the main arguments, I shouldn't have touched that microphone, oh boy. I did think that one of the main arguments was that we were an adjacent community, and therefore we should have 10% by December 31st, 2024, which is not going to happen. So I guess I'm confused, like, why are we not going to have a 10% zoning written by December 31st, 2024?
Because they may not decide that we're an adjacent community. We don't know that for a fact. We were looking at, a lot of people were arguing that we should be adjacent because we do not have, the trolley is not a subway, would be the argument on that. So, but we don't know. So rather than spending the resources of our consultant sort of looking and doing, because we thought originally, let's do multiple plans, let's have, different things available. We did not know about the ADU that we have, and looking at how important our site plan approval is to have that ready, that the time and the resources to sort of go down different rabbit holes, and not be working on something and, fine tuning something that actually would be, that we wouldn't need, just didn't seem to make sense as far as time and resources. But, yeah.
I
But
sort of understand, and I
that-
hear how long your meetings are. I know you put in a ton of work. I guess I just thought that the 10% was the bare minimum that we were going to have to do, and I thought, like, you could argue that, we didn't have to do the 25% because we're an adjacent community, but I don't know if you can argue that we don't have to do the 10%. So then what's our argument for not having the 10% by the end of this year?
So, well, depending on if you did, I don't know if you were able to follow the oral arguments. So the oral arguments had different levels of constitutional. What is constitutional? Are the guidelines constitutional? So if the guidelines are found not to be constitutional or not properly promulgated, the guidelines go away. So then the term adjacent communities, those aren't from the actual law. Those are actually from the guidelines. So the whole term, and I think we all, and I, including myself, got caught up, we're not are we rapid transit? Are we not rapid transit? None of those terms, adjacent communities, rapid transit, has anything to do with the actual law itself. So those came from the guidelines. So when we're waiting to hear the decision from the AG, it may be those guidelines are tossed or not found to be necessary at this time. Then we're actually looking at the law, which is the 15 units per acre, a reasonable size. We're back to the law. So that's what I think we're waiting on, because we can't necessarily assume that the guidelines, which are being treated as regulations, may not be found to be properly promulgated. Does that help?
Thanks. Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Do we have somebody? Judy.
Yes, thank you. Um, so curious, question to Meredith, and I guess to you too, Thomas Chair. Um, should we, at this moment, be going into all the, um, nitty gritties of the MBTA until we hear from the Attorney General's office or the lawsuit, wherever, where I think it's at the state courts at the moment. Should we not delve into what could be, what not could be, until we actually get that decision?
That's exactly what we're saying. That's where we are right now, as a planning board, saying, we've done a lot of groundwork when we know what the decision is, but until then, we really, can't get into the details until we know.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Two questions.
Yeah.
If it happens, one of the issues was parking, because it was only one car per unit. And I think they say the average is really 1.5, or it could be up to 2. So there's somewhere, like if you were in East Milton Square, there were 1,100 units that were gonna be built. So it's either 300 or 600 cars that would have to be parked in the street because there was not enough adequate parking. Is that something that can be controlled with this?
With, are you asking about the ADU?
MBTA.
And the MBTA? So we can look at, parking is something that we're looking at and it would vary depending on the district that we're looking at. We've been charting that out and doing a calculation of that and what we could require for parking.
Okay.
So,
So you can
Yes.
change that. You could change that with the MBTA zoning.
what I was reading from, that was from the ADU language, that wasn't from the MBTA, so.
Right, no, I heard that.
That was, okay.
I'm sorry.
So
I
you're
was
going
talking
back
about
to what
MBTA.
Article 1, yes. So we have not, focused on parking, but that is something that we definitely have spoken a great deal about and making sure that there is sufficient parking, especially in areas that are tighter, such as East Milton Square.
Okay.
And that area. And especially since there's 2 new developments that are going to be going up in that location. That's,
Having the developer make adequate parking, so everybody's not parked in the street.
correct,
Okay.
exactly. So.
And you said ADU is 1 per unit?
So it's 1 per unit, and it actually.
That's a state law.
You don't have to, if it's within a half mile of a subway station, ferry terminal, bus station, you can't even require 1 unit, which is, I find really incredible, because a lot of people, don't necessarily work in Boston, and they love to live by a T, but don't necessarily drive. So there are some concerns about that hopefully that whoever owned that property and they were putting in an ADU would want to make sure that there's sufficient parking, because Milton does not allow on-street parking. So it would, yeah, it's not a requirement that we can impose, but hopefully the homeowner would.
Okay. And just a comment, so
Yeah.
being from District 7, there were gonna be, like Milton had to build 1,700 units. 1,100 of them were gonna be in East Milton's proper, I guess, or the square, 1 square mile. Since there's 10 districts in Milton, is there a way to like spread them out if we end up losing the court case?
That's what we're looking to do. Yeah, that's absolutely what we're looking to do. We're looking at new districts, Randolph Avenue, where we have a 40B project currently going in, is one of the districts that we've looked at. So we're looking at other options. And it's a little bit of an interesting formula in the way you look at it, because you have to look at the entire parcel. So a parcel, let's just say Fuller Village is a parcel that somebody would say, well, why don't we look at zoning up there, and there's multifamily housing up there. The problem is that when the land size is so large, it draws down your average of 15 units per acre, because otherwise you would have 800 units or 1,200 units on Brush Hill Road. So that was a district that we had looked at, but it just didn't make sense, because we would have to keep our, to not draw our our average down so low that it falls below 15 units per acre, we would have to create so many units. So those are the type of things that we're looking at in combination with our consultants. So, but we're definitely looking at other areas
Got it.
as much as possible
Okay,
and spreading it out because it's, not impacting just one area.
Okay.
And looking at roadways and how people get on highway, how you get on the highway. And obviously, Granite Ave is a mess right now, and it's a real challenge for the neighbors, so.
so is it
That's-
Randolph Ave, and so.
And
is it-
I know,
So
and
the
it
whole
doesn't
thing
seem
just
to be getting
traveled.
better, I know. It's, so, yeah, very much so. And that's why we'll have a public forum too, and, once we know, so we really can hear from the residents and they can see the challenges that we have, so.
Okay,
Good.
thank you.
And there's just a couple more questions, but I think that, you had mentioned the court case before the SJC, and I think some of the issues you raised, like, will this even happen? And I just wanted to just reiterate that, because I think some of the comments by some of the justices indicated that, this might be all there is in terms of the statute, and the legislature might have to go back. But I know that it is a big unknown
Right.
in terms of what the court's looking to do,
Right,
so.
so, yeah, at this time. And of course, then, we look at, is it an opt-in, opt-out? A lot of towns that are just now coming online are saying, is the juice worth the squeeze? Or, is it worth doing what the impacts might be? I think some towns are saying, and we're seeing quite a few saying, you know what, the grants that we would be losing, and that's where I think it really, it's important for you all to be thinking of, when we know and be thinking, one of the questions that was asked during the oral arguments is, well, how much has Milton gotten in the past? Because what are they losing out on? And that's sort of a question, and because there's 3 different categories, and the categories that were originally put into with the legislation said they were things that sometimes we weren't even eligible for, but it was $100,000 a year over 10 years. So that's not insignificant, but yet some people felt like, well, we have not been getting a lot of those MassWorks grants funded. So, and they do prioritize depending on the town, the needs of different towns. So, but again, that, we don't want to jump ahead until we know, but that's something that's going to play into the decision that our town has to make, so.
Oh, thank you. So, I know that because Jane moved it, so I don't know. I'll move it back. So I know that it's very unknown with the court case, and I was at the oral argument, so I'm following along with what you're saying, so thank you. I know that the Attorney General had asked for, and again, who knows what the judge is gonna do, or the judges are gonna do, but after the decision, if Milton were to, I don't wanna say lose, but if the court were to decide against Milton, the Attorney General asked that a zoning plan be put in place 90 days later. Again, I don't know what will happen, but it sounds like to me, you all are putting in some steps. Do you think that it's a very tight time frame? It seems like, do you think it would be possible to do it
I
if
do.
there were an order
I do.
in
Yeah.
that kind of a
Yep.
short enough? That seems
Yes.
consistent with the time frame you were saying. but-
Exactly, and, we
Okay.
would probably have to add some meetings, we would, but I think our board has said we're prepared, and we feel like we've done a level of the groundwork so that we could have something ready fairly quickly, so,
Thanks.
yeah.
Julie?
Hi. On a similar vein, the planning board was here before the warrant committee a little over a year ago now. It was October 31st of last year. And we were told that you all were probably 3 to 6 months away from a compliant article, that even if we get sued, that, the intention is to keep pushing forward until we have a plan that is 25% compliant, just in case we need it. So, and even some members even went as far as to say that they'd be willing to stick to a May town meeting timeline, so that would have been May of this year. So I'm surprised to hear that there isn't an article ready to go in case it turns out that we need one. I, based on that conversation, would have assumed that you guys would have been working on both a 10% and a 25% one in the event that we lose. And as Liz said, you know, we have a very short time for compliance. And to hear from you that it's not realistic to have an article in front of town meeting for the February 24th meeting is concerning if we find out that we lose and we have a 90-day time. So what does that mean?
And I understand your concerns. It was really the timing of having the ADU come before us, really, at our last couple of meetings, just felt like we need to have that done. And, you know, we might be able to, you know, depending on what happens and when we hear, we may, so I don't want to completely rule out the February 24th. That we would have something ready. Obviously, we would work as quickly as possible. If it was, you know, within the 90-day period, I think that's very, very realistic for us to do. It will all come down to when we get when we hear from the decision from the AG, and then we'll be focused on that.
You think the
Absolutely.
90-day timeline is realistic for the planning board to create an article, or for you to create an article and town meeting to pass it? Because won't town meeting need to have passed it within the 90 days?
I don't know I think that was a request from the Attorney General, but I don't think that was, I did not hear that from during the oral arguments.
Okay. I have another question about the ADUs. You had said that the regulations will be in place by February 2nd, that this goes into effect
It goes
February
into
2nd.
effect, right.
But we won't have our town meeting until February 24th. So what happens in that interim if someone applies?
There is a brief window there, and, you know, I don't, you know, and listening, you know, it was interesting, I was on a call where EOHLC was talking about their regulations, and they said, well, we don't expect, you know, everyone to sign up for an ADU right away, but we don't know. There is a little bit of a time there, a couple weeks, but I think by the time it would go to the building department, just sort of, I think people will be learning more about ADUs and about, you know, construction costs are quite expensive right now. I don't know that everyone's going to rush to do something. They may be thinking about it, but I think in 2 weeks, you know, given, you know, or those 3 weeks, you know, something could happen. I don't want to not be truthful. I mean, it just will depend, but it would be nice if we could, you know, hold people off until we have, you know, something finalized, because it will actually benefit them as well, I think, to have, you know, an ADU that works, but, so.
And the 65 times that you said you guys have met, what time frame is that over? I'm just curious.
That was, I would say that is since the last, I would go back to 2023 on that. I think that was the rough count. When we look back, I think it was early 2023.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
How are the ADUs taxed? Is there a separate real estate tax for the unit, or is it part of the?
So that's something that's coming up in the questions is, does this get assessed separately? Because, and it also, that was a question that was on the call, is how will these be assessed? It certainly is going to add a lot more to, you know, our building department is already overwhelmed with, you know, building permits and new construction, but the assessor's office will have to also. And the other question that came up is, will ADUs actually count just as a regular housing, a separate housing unit, which goes to what you're saying with an assessed value? And if it does, would the state consider allowing these to be considered affordable units? Because the argument behind which currently they're not considered affordable units, but the argument that people have been saying and talking is that the reason why the state was pushing to do this was to create more options of smaller, more affordable housing. So therefore, if they're not affordable, they're actually going to count against our a number of housing units and our 10%, that we need to get to have safe haven from having 40B projects. So it's actually, for all the towns, that have achieved their have gotten to their 10%, they're going to be set back when this ADU law comes into place, unless the state would consider, which would be really great, if they would consider these to be considered in some sort of form an affordable status. But that's a question about the appraisals and how that will and utilities. It's a question on, are these separate utilities? There's a lot of things that insurance will have to be ironed out on these. So I think unfortunately, the state is trying to figure it out. Well, they're learning to, on the fly. It's sort of the way MBTA happened, and I don't think all the details have been completely considered. Thank you. Okay, should we keep going? Oh, yeah, keep.
Yeah, thanks. To continue, so I understand that we don't know what the court will decide, but to follow up on what my colleague, Ms. Maxwell, was saying, could maybe the planning board there's a whole process internally of somebody has to put something for the warrant, and then we have to talk about it, and then the warrant has to go to print with our recommendation. And all these things take weeks and weeks. So would it be a good idea for the planning board to propose a 25% article and a 10% article for the February 24th meeting, knowing that, if you propose those in December and it goes to print in January, if the court comes back in mid-January and says, nope, guys, you don't have to do anything, well, then we're pretty sure town meeting is going to vote no on those, and that's fine. Or if the court says you have to do 10%, well, then we'll have one ready to vote on. If the court says you have to do 25%, we'll have one ready to vote on. It's a bit of a chicken and the egg problem, who moves first and who does what first, but could that be something the planning board does?
I think it's, in addition to the time and resources, which we're trying to, do a lot of different things, working on different things, it's also, there's also some concern from members that, are we doing something, is it disrespectful to start doing something before the SJC has made a decision? I don't think that, I don't know that they're watching our meetings, I don't know, but we don't want to, we don't want to lead them in any different direction for any reason. So we felt like right now, sort of being quiet, I think when the press is asked when a decision is being made of someone who, we have a pending legal lawsuit situation. And so it is often viewed as, you really shouldn't be discussing this at this time until the decision's made. And I think that was a concern that, that actions that or things that we're discussing could have some effect in any way. And it's out of respect for the SJC to not be discussing it further at this time.
But my understanding is you have been discussing it, you have been making forward progress to a solution. This would just be taking another step or two towards that solution.
Yeah, we've been looking at different
I don't know if the town council
combinations.
recommended
Yeah,
you
we've
don't
been looking
do
at
it.
different combinations of what could come with that. And that's why we don't think it would take too long. So I'm, when I'm saying the May town meeting, that's assuming that we don't get a decision until the end of December or mid-December. That would be unrealistic to try to get the public forums done, because we also, part of what we need to do, as well as bringing it to you, is we need to have public forums on this.
Did town council recommend we not put something on the warrant? You said you don't want to influence the court's decision.
Put something
Is
on
that
the-
something that,
Before we would know what we were asked to do?
you seem to say that it was part of a legal strategy to not put something together. Was that a town council recommendation?
No, that was
Or did I misunderstand?
No, that was not, that was a decision that the planning board felt. And talking to other attorneys, not necessarily town council. Town council's specialty is really municipal law. It's not litigation.
Oh, I guess, yeah, when I
Yeah.
said town council, I guess I meant our council in this case.
Yeah.
And if you're not
Yeah,
allowed to
we've
say
we've
that's-
spoken to different various other litigators, and so sort of just a quiet period right now.
Just in terms of legality, maybe we shouldn't be discussing
Yeah.
Okay.
things as much.
Yeah.
But
Any other?
But I appreciate your questions, yeah.
Tom,
Judy?
may I interrupt just for a quick moment? I'm at your table where you and Julia Maxwell, your mics aren't projecting loud enough. I know there's only two of us on Zoom, but when you or Julia are talking, I have a very difficult time. I have to lean into my computer near where where the sound is coming out to catch everything you're saying. If you could have MATV check on that, or perhaps move your mics closer to where you're sitting. Not sure.
Judy, we'll do a better job. We're getting some direction from cable access now. We'll
Oh, thank you.
try to speak a little louder also.
I don't want to miss anything.
Thank you, Judy. Judy, you have anything else about anything that Chair Hall has discussed?
No, as I mentioned before, I believe that it would be difficult to, it'd be like playing a poker game and saying, hey, everyone, I got 3 aces in my draw. Now everyone knows how to bet. So until we hear from the courts exactly how we are going to proceed, how we should be proceeding, I think getting into the core issues of districts and what we're thinking about, whether we have 10%, 25%, I think those things do need to wait until we get either a very strong signal from the court that they're leaning one way, or we have the actual decision. And I understand everyone's concern that time limits are not favorable in this regard, but we're in kind of a different situation than other towns. We are dependent on a decision from the courts to proceed. So that would be what I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy.
I understand that there are sensitive aspects not to be discussed because of the lawsuit. I was gonna ask, as far as with the planning board, select board, us, are we contingent on an outcome? Because I know with the zoning decision, it's gonna affect the budget potentially. I was curious if we are kind of prepping in case of contingency, how we're gonna like approach this, say if it's a yes and we have to proceed with the zoning.
Well, I think we are, as far as contingency, I mean, I don't think right now financially, which is what your primary goal is, looking at your budgets, I don't think our allocation, and again, this is something that I think the SJC is also going to be asked to weigh on, because it was part of the oral arguments, is what are the penalties that can be imposed on a town? Is there a limit? What we've been seeing is they keep changing some of the penalties that they've been putting in, the guidelines, and adding things that weren't originally there. They've been going back, updating. So that's going to be part of the decision on which will also be asked. Is whether there was the fund for the seawall. Is if the guidelines weren't properly promulgated, is that money that actually Milton should have been awarded, and it should not have been withheld because we weren't out of compliance with what the guidelines were saying, and we should have maybe been awarded. But it's I think it's gonna there's different scenarios, so it's hard to say right now. But I think we're gonna have a pretty good clear picture fairly soon.
Liz.
Well, I'm going to ask what I thought you were going to ask, but maybe you did, I don't know. So you're right that our primary focus here, or one of our primary focuses, is budgetary.
Right.
So with that in mind, maybe you're going to talk about this, maybe this is point 3, and so you can just say, wait on that. But for the ADU, really the three things that we talked about so far. So for the changing the amendments for the site plan approval, for the kind of maybe temporary regulations, I guess, for the temporary rules for the ADUs until the regulations come out. And then for the consultants for the MBTA communities that we're using now pending the lawsuit, sort of, if you could talk about each of those three things as far as like budgetary needs for your department and kind of how you see that playing into the next fiscal year.
So, so Tim did put a request in for $100,000 more than what we currently have. We have a lot of really exciting things that I'll get to, other than just the things that we're required of the state. The overlay zoning, we've already hired a consultant for that. We have, we're doing our design guidelines right now for, again, I'll get into that for East Milton. But we're beginning an economic development plan, which I'll also talk about, which we have hired a consultant for that. So at this time, there are some unknowns about other future planning. One of the things that you might recall from town meeting is we did a codification of our zoning bylaws, which was a big first step, but now we sort of have to go back, and we really need an attorney who can go through our zoning bylaws, because there's things that are duplicated in certain areas. There's just there's things that aren't relevant anymore that might not be applicable, that have just been in our zoning for 100 years, things that need to be cleaned up. So was going to be the second phase, codification, and then going back and looking at what our zoning laws are and seeing what's applicable and relevant or unnecessary at this point. So that's a pretty big ticket item that we'll have. I'm actually meeting with Tim on Monday, and to go through sort of an overall sense of where we are budget-wise, how much we have left. Tim is really good about getting grants, and he's been wonderful, and really being able to come in underneath what our ask is. But just at this time, he did put in, I think it's 100,000 over. I know last year, I don't believe we received that request. So I think these are just some things that we'd like to sort of clean house and be able to. And then, again, with MBTA, if we need other resources, we want to, that's part of, managing those resources wisely is very important, but we will need to get to the end on this. So I'll be able to provide more specifics going in the future.
Perfect.
Fine.
In relation to 40Bs, what is Milton's percentage on affordability right now?
We're about 5%. We have, I think, at the time when all the 40B projects that were permitted, we were going to be close to 10% if they were all built. Right now, just with the cost of construction, various interest rates, some of the projects have not gone forward at this time, so we don't know that everything will actually get built that was approved. But if they did, we would be close to our 10%. But right now, we still are, I think, 400 some units short. We have approved Winter Valley, which I think they're going for their funding. Winter Valley will have 30 affordable units. We'll get credit for the Ice House once that's completed. So there are some things, and then 7-Eleven, Randolph Avenue. So we've got some things coming in. Apparently, things are moving forward for the Falcone project in East Milton Square. So, 90 units here, 90 units. It'll start happening. But right now, we just, until they are completed, we can't count them yet. Yep.
Jay?
I'm curious about the ADU article that might be coming up in February. Did we consider not doing an article, and what would the consequences be if we don't do an article, or if town meeting doesn't approve an article?
So that is something that town meeting will have to decide, but because it is law by right, a resident can do this. That is law, right, immediately. We just would not have a say in how it could be done. It would be very difficult. We would not be able to prohibit an ADU that followed a lot, that a building department would approve and said this is happening legally.
Okay, I'm just trying to think of the analogy with the MBTA law, like that we,
So the question with the MBTA law is that was tied to, and this is, again, I'm not a lawyer, but I'll just say that some of the argument is if it was absolutely a mandate, a state mandate, why did they put in any punishments, any penalties? So because typically when you see penalties, that means, okay, if you don't obey this law, this is what happens. So then that's where the SJC is now saying, does a town have a right just to say no, and these penalties will be imposed, or do they just absolutely, they don't have a right to say no at all? So that's, because there's penalties in it, it led some legal opinions to be that it is an opt-in, it's not a mandate. So that's part of what we will be learning on that. So where this is law, I mean, I think ADU, it's, it doesn't have penalties in there if you don't do this. It's just what the law is. And obviously we want to obey the law. We want to do what's right, so.
yeah, I'm just trying to think of like any questions that any residents might have or questions that we should be asking. And so,
Sure, that's a.
that's my question is,
An
and I'm
ADU
not
is by
trying to be
right.
I'm not trying to be sarcastic, but if
No,
we
it's-
said, no, we're not going to comply with the MBTA law, which maybe I'm paraphrasing, maybe that's not what we said, but why can't we say no to this one too? That's what I think people will ask, and that's what I'm
Right.
trying to understand.
Again, it will be, because there were penalties, was it an opt-in law or a mandate? Because I don't think, and were the regulations properly promulgated? I don't think most people are looking to not obey the law. I truly believe that most Miltonians, if it is the law, but if it is an opt-in, then the town would have a choice. And that's what, communities throughout the Boston area right now are evaluating, and some are making the decision to take the penalties and roll that dice. But, so I think that's going to be an important part of that decision and what Milton will have to decide to do. But there's no penalties with the ADU, it just is the law.
Okay. In terms of, I'd like to kind of move this along away from MBTA. Was kind of talking a lot about it, but do you have anything?
Quick
Sure.
clarification question regarding the ADUs. So if the guidelines aren't in place by the time the law goes into effect in February, any units that are built in between the point in which law goes into effect and the guidelines are published, are they effectively automatically grandfathered, or what happens, or do guidelines retroactively apply to ADUs?
So there may be, depending on what they come up with, hopefully and this is where, part of the problem with the MBTA communities was the guidelines expanded what the actual law said. So it went beyond what was actually required in the law. So if there will be a public process that will go through. If there is something that is found to be, I think, appropriate, the guidelines or the regulations that we did not have in ours, we would probably have to come back to town meeting and amend that. But I think we want our ADU to have some teeth to it, to have some, to really, if somebody does apply for an ADU, that it's done, in a way that would represent the character of the town. And I think as long as what we put in is reasonable, and that's what sort of the law is stating, we might be fine. But there's only certain things that we can limit in this, so
And
it's.
just to clarify, what happens to any units that are actually built between the time the law goes into effect and when
Those would still be allowed, those would still
they're
be.
automatically grandfathered?
They would be allowed,
Okay.
yes, exactly, yes. It wouldn't change their status. And we actually have right now, because this came up with some questions in other communities that they're asking, some communities already have ADUs. So they might have and technically Milton does, temporary apartment bylaw is sort of, it's the same thing, but we just allow, it's for families or in-laws or, work staff that is there at the house. Our ADUs, those are still allowed. You're not kicking, we're not, those towns are not going to be kicking people out and saying, no, you've got to redo this whole project. But there will be questions on how that transitions and how they either reapply for the proper status. So that's one of the questions that that's a good question because other communities are asking it and we haven't heard the answers necessarily from the state. But, yeah. Okay, all right, so
Yeah, we can move
just to
on.
touch a little bit on, so ADU, East Milton overlay zoning. So this is, right now, what we're looking at is we've already done overlay zoning for the Milton Village, for those of you who followed that. We're now looking at East Milton for businesses that are in the business district. It's not residential district, but it's really the businesses that we're looking to give opportunities when there is redevelopment. If a building is torn down or redeveloped, that there is an opportunity for there to be mixed use, which means business on the first floor. It would still require the businesses to be on the first floor, but that you could have residential units upstairs. I'll use the Elliott Physical Therapy building as an example. That was a building that was torn down, very tastefully rebuilt, but that has commercial on the first floor, residential units up above. So that we want to give, again, another way to offer a variety of different housing opportunities for people, especially in an area like East Milton, that they could walk, go to do their errands, go to the drugstore, not get in a car, be able to be in East Milton, but be able to live and live in a mixed use unit. So we've done the mapping for that. For those of you, you may have seen there was a survey that was put out online, and there's been a couple of different public forums over in East Milton that I think Liz attended and quite a few may have attended. So we have zoning language that we've gotten back, and we will be discussing that. That's something we're also in the process of working on that will be likely for May, because it's sort of in two parts. You can think of the zoning language, which is the law, but then we have a design guidelines piece, which is sort of goes back to that site plan approval with what we can ask that a building looks like, how it can conform to the neighborhood, essentially. So we're going to be looking at that piece. That's going to be presented by our consultant probably next month. I don't know if Tim has a specific date, but we're going to do another community forum after we've had a chance for the board to talk about the things that he's prepared, and then we'll do another one and give time for community input on that overlay zoning. So that will just be, you can still have a business, nothing changes. The business that exists there today can still exist. There's still the zoning, it's sort of underlying zoning no matter what happens, but this is just something that is an option if a property owner decides, hey, you know what, I'd like to add 2 stories to my building, or I'd like to build a new building. This is an opportunity for them to have some residential component as well as the business component, but they still have to have the business component there. Okay. And so then the other just interesting thing that we are just kicking this off. We've just had one meeting on October 10th, and that's our economic development plan. We've hired the Metropolitan Area Planning Commission as our consultants to work on this. And they briefly just gave a presentation, and you can go online for anyone interested, gave a presentation on the town economic development planning process. And that's why I'm bringing this up. It's not an article, but I thought it's about money. So I thought you all might be interested in knowing about this. The board discussed the scope of work, community priorities, and how to engage the community, and the roles and responsibility of the MAPC team and town boards. Things that we're looking at were sustainable economic activities, facilitating economic investment, expanding the tax base, looking at traffic and parking mitigation. This is something where we can ask developers to actually, when they do a new development, we can ask them to actually pay some fees into our traffic mitigation. Identifying our existing economic strengths, challenges, and opportunities for economic development in the Milton Village, East Milton Square, the Central Business District, Northern Granite Ave. And we talked a little bit about, in the west side of Milton, a lot of, folks on the west side really feel like they don't have as many amenities. So looking at possible areas where, again, it's very residential, but there may be some pockets that we could find area for development and for zoning for areas that could give an opportunity for coffee shops or little small amenities, on the west side of town. And then also, we will be conducting a survey of what types of amenities Milton residents would like to see and what, to attract, proposals. So we want to have community input in this process. We need to look at our traffic, where we're looking at doing economic development and be realistic, but looking at if there are opportunities and missed opportunities right now where we could be revitalizing an area or expanding an area of business that would bring revenue to the town. So that's going to be exciting. We're just now starting that. Again, you'll be hearing about forums and surveys that you can fill out to say, hey, what would you like to see in the town, in Milton? And then the last thing we have, just in the Milton Village, the Historic District, Tom had just asked me to touch a little bit on that.
Mm-hmm.
The Planning Board, and I'm also serve on the Historic Commission, both voted to support the idea of doing this study and supported the idea, the concept of putting together a local historic district. For those, if you've looked at or read any of Teal's books, but the Milton Village is one of our most significant historic locations, and the buildings down there are really incredible. This is really about preservation of those. I have not seen, and our board has not seen the final draft language, which I know you're going to be having the local historic district come before you. And when I say we're in support of it, we just haven't seen the final language, so we're not saying that specific plan because we have not seen it. But the idea of doing this, I think it's a really good thing. It's one of the few tools that towns have to preserve their significant historic buildings. So you will see it in many different communities. I think the template that they're using is based on what other towns have used. But again, I have not seen the final language, so I don't have any comment to that, but just the overall concept is something that I think would be very useful to the town. And Milton Village would be a good area because it's mostly business. It's not a residential. There's a few residences down there, but the mapping seems to be mostly just commercial buildings that,
Yeah.
we want to protect.
Well, Cheryl, we'll have we're going to be having the historic district come in and present to us as they had done last year. And I know, I think there was some additions and subtractions, so.
Right.
I have not seen it either, but they'll be coming in. And,
Right.
and they'll be before you also, so we're looking
That's
forward
great.
to the new product.
That's great. So terrific. And, I'll keep you posted if other things come up. I know the select board, I was watching the meeting that they're talking about possibly doing a lighting, an article, thinking about coming up with something that I think they would come to us because it would fall under zoning to see if that's something that we would endorse and support. I think a lighting article would be really good at some point that would be appropriate for Milton. But again, I don't know what that article would look like at this point. So, yeah.
Is that to provide lighting in public spaces, or is that to limit private houses having certain lights?
Yeah, it would be more on limitations of what would be allowed. When we do projects, when we have applicants come before us right now, one of the things that we ask all new for new construction is that it's dark sky compliant. So looking to do things that are environmentally conscious, not adding, light pollution is a concern of our boards. And so if it's done in the right way, and it would have to be, I believe, for it to be endorsed by the town, a really high level of light, and there's ways to measure that now, that it would be considered an offense to your neighbor if you had that type of lighting. And, we're seeing other things coming up, like sport courts now, with some really bright lights that light up a whole neighborhood. Things, I haven't discussed this, I don't know, but that's something I do hear sometimes people are concerned with. When somebody puts in a sport court in their yard, it really can light up, and the light poles can be tall. And so I think a lot of towns do have a lighting, some sort of lighting bylaw. So, but we would just need to make sure it was the right thing for our town. So.
Cheryl, this was something that has been previously discussed, and there was language prior. So this isn't a new thing.
Yes,
at all.
and some people on the board may have remembered that, coming forth. So, so that's, but that's a select board discussion. We haven't discussed that on our board yet, so just something that might be coming down. So I think that's all.
Okay.
Did I hit it on everything that?
Yeah, as to
The future board needs and
yeah,
building
and-
development. Yeah, so one thing that I just was thinking, just thinking of, one of the things, and I think we all hear it now, is, we have these regulations in Milton, we have these laws, we have, people get special permits, but then nothing ever gets, but no, who's enforcing it? Like, things just happen. Traffic, are we, is it being enforced? So one of the things that I was questioning, but it was brought to my attention that there is a, it's in the building department, but there is somebody who does oversee, violations, who's an enforcement officer. So I think, I had always thought it was the head of the building department, whether it was Joe Prondak acted as, and I don't know exactly who does the enforcement, but there is a position there, because I was thinking that would be something that the warrant committee might want to consider funding. The other thing, again, we're in the process of hiring a new town planner, but a lot of towns that are our size actually have a staff of 4. I think with all of the development between the many 40B projects, new construction that we've had, it's been a lot for our town staff, our planning board staff, and they've done a great job. But if we continue to see this level of work that needs to be done, possibly an additional, even part-time grant writer or planning staff would be, I think most towns similar size do have a staff that's a little bit larger. There's a lot of evening meetings that they need to attend. It's a real dedication, especially if it's a young, someone young with young children. It's hard to be out every night for public meetings, and so they do a great job. But again, extra, staff can help with that too. But that's not coming. They have not asked for that yet, but I know that would be like a great thing down the line if possible. So.
Well, Cheryl, if I could, just following some of the planning board, I know there's a lot of discussion, about the various construction projects, restaurants, especially in the East Milton area. So in terms of like enforcement, as you mentioned, not just the building code.
Right.
And of course, we're building more. We potentially could have look like a different town. Like, from your perspective, in terms of what you see potentially coming online in terms of new units and potentially a new restaurant or maybe 2, like, what's your spitball in terms of like what would be an adequate enforcement wing for not planning but like Department of Health, like those types of things? Like, do you see a restaurant inspector, a apartment building inspector, like those types of things that maybe
our
we should
town
consider?
staff really wears a lot of different hats. When we do have, what recently has been come up is, there's been, whether it's rodents in, certain parts of town, mice, rats even. If there are strong odors coming because grease traps aren't being cleaned as often as they should, those are Board of Health, obviously. And they do an amazing job. So I can't speak for the Board of Health on if they feel that they're short-staffed right now. I think they do an amazing job, and they seem to be well-staffed. But again, that would need to come from them. And again, I don't want to speak for the building department, but I do know the building department is really under a lot. And with things like ADUs coming on, there's a lot more inspections that are going to be having to happen. And I think they really do an incredible job on just a real skeleton crew, and could probably use more. But again, I would want that to come from, the building department to say that. But it's just something that I observe because we work so closely with the development projects that they're overseeing. So.
Liz.
So similarly, on the enforcement front, I know there's been some discussion, the select board, various different boards, but just because you were talking about traffic issues before, and I love the idea of having the developers kind of have to put some money in the mitigation. Very passionate about traffic myself. Is there any thought, and I don't know if it would be the planning board and the select board, and can't speak for the select board, but to having some kind of broader, more town-wide or different parts of town traffic study or traffic mitigation put into effect? Because I know a lot of the time it'll be building by building, development by development, road by road, but is there any sense of kind of creating more of a broader understanding of our traffic problems and what to do about them?
There is a comprehensive traffic study, and that is something that we have been talking about. We've done a lot of different studies, you're right, with different areas, but we actually...
I'm not knocking that. I think it's great
No.
too, but...
Exactly, but that is something that we talk about frequently, is how do we do something that's a more comprehensive plan? Because what we do see is when one development, throws off, is built, all of a sudden, or some traffic change, that all of a sudden, all the latter streets are being, utilized, and it's affecting, and it's like one thing triggers the next. So we do have, and this is interesting, we do have, and it's under the traffic commissions. This is sort of their world and things that they look at. But we do have technology that we purchased as a town with, I think, the funds from a mitigation fund for the purpose of doing exactly what you're talking about. The problem is you have to be trained to use this technology. So having somebody use this, and then we actually outsource it, and we use a consultant in Beta. You might be familiar with Beta, who runs different programs for us. But it's really, I think we should internally maybe have somebody who's in the IT department or whatever department, but that's somebody who knows how to run this, and we can run the model ourselves without having to outsource it. And I don't know, again, what the financial pros and cons to doing that, having somebody that either could do that part-time but we do own the technology to be able to do that. And it is something that we're impacted with on a daily basis in all parts of town. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me say
Brian-
somebody
oh, no,
else.
Brian, you go ahead.
Begs the question, there's no state guidelines on controlling traffic, or can you deny a complex because it would just cause too much traffic?
So it's really difficult to prove that, because that's always what we hear from neighbors. We cannot do this because it's just it'll create too much traffic. There's a rating scale for, is it a B, C, D, is it an F rating? What is it? I would say a lot of our roads should be F rating if they're not. It's amazing. We're looking at the Gardner School on Blue Hill Ave, and up the stretch by, up near Curry College. And they're I think they gave it a C, and it's, we're trying to tell the applicant, do you have any idea what it's like to try to get out and make a left-hand turn on Blue Hill Ave coming, from the west side? You should, understand what you're looking at on this site here. So, but it's very hard to, when we had the memory care project, that was a real concern. And there are studies that we require that they do. Often they'll come back and they will have done them in the summer when people are on vacation, right before the 4th of July. And right now we're requiring the Gardner School to actually go back and revise those traffic studies because the 4th of July, the week before the 4th of July in the summertime is not when all the schools are and the commuters aren't out there. So we do look at that. We ask them sometimes to go back. It's very difficult to deny a project because of that. But it does have impacts.
There's no
and you can't,
laws
yeah.
that say you can do that, right?
There really aren't. No, we would, yeah.
Too bad.
I know. Sometimes we feel the same way, but yeah, it's very difficult to do. Yeah.
Emma?
You mentioned about hiring a consultant for economic development, Cosmopolitan.
Yeah.
And if we haven't been told this yet, what are the current goals, especially for the incoming fiscal year, that we should know about?
So these are more long-term goals and strategies. So we'll be able to have a report of what we would like to see happen that we'll be doing. I think it's 6 to 8 months. I think would be a realistic time frame, and then we could have sort of an action plan. But we don't really control the individual sites, so we can't tell a homeowner or a property owner, okay, the town really wants a coffee shop right here. This is what we want you to build. We can't do that, but we can guide them and we can prioritize and we can sort of make it our focus of giving opportunities. And what we can do is that we can actually look at zoning in certain areas that maybe have been limited for various reasons to, would this be wise to have a development in this location and look at doing some zoning relief in some of those areas, if the benefit, if it would be worth it. One of the nights, I don't know if you remember on Brook Road, the Knights of Columbus, the old Knights of Columbus building, which is just a dilapidated old site, that was actually permitted years ago, and that was, so we were really hoping to see something, townhomes, doing some, possible affordable housing there, and the owner just went quiet, and it just, so it's like sometimes people are sitting on properties and we're asking why. The Swift Hat Shop down in Milton Village, when you go down, which used to be just a really charming building, it's a complete mess right now. That developer has been coming back. He keeps coming back with plans, previewing things, and we've been told we're going to be getting something new, but that's an area that could be a redevelopment, that could be something that would be bringing in a larger tax base and can benefit the community. And the building already, there's a building there. I think at this point it would have to be torn down, but a new structure could be built, and it could be either housing or a new business. So we can have sort of a roadmap to help and to guide, but sort of looking at these opportunities and making sure that we're saying, are we doing everything that we can do to make this happen for the residents of Milton who want to see something go in a certain location. Yeah.
Is the Milton, the local historic district study committee, was the historical commission involved in determining that area, or?
They came to us with a couple of different areas.
Yeah.
We supported, they narrowed it down. I think they talked to some of the residents. I think Hillside Neighborhood Association they were approached, and were not interested. They weren't getting the feeling that they were going to be interested. They didn't really know enough about it to jump on board, which makes sense. So I think when they narrowed it down, they came to the Historical Commission and they said, what do you know, what kind of resources or data do you have on the historical significance? And we have for years hired a we've had a consultant who's been doing surveys of the historic properties. We have a huge book of Milton historic properties, and a significant number of those fall into the Milton Village area. And so for them, it just seemed to be sort of obvious. This is where our greatest number of large, significant historic buildings. So they narrowed it down. We didn't ultimately make that, we weren't part of that decision.
I was wondering about the East Milton with the railway district.
Yeah.
And that seems to have some historic significance.
It does, and yeah.
And based upon, I was on the sign review committee meeting last night, and I know that you mentioned the whole district and that the mixed use with the overlay, but I'm wondering if, and I don't know, if that would be an area to be looking at as well, because like the whole redo of Santander, which doesn't really fit with,
Yeah.
and again, it's not site plan review, that was about the sign, but the building and the facade, and all I kept thinking is on the Cape, where you have adorable little banks that fit right into the character of the neighborhood, would be lovely there.
Right.
And it's just very different, and it stands out. And
So
if-
that's something that I completely agree. It would have to be something, I think, because I would use the example of Pierce, on Pierce and Mechanic Street.
Yeah.
Pierce, what we've seen in the last couple of years, the applications for demolishing some really charming historic properties, or that have been completely altered, had that local, a little local historic district there, it would have taken the homeowners to buy into that idea and say, we don't want this to be overly restrictive, but we just don't want people coming in and completely ruining. And if you drive down Pierce, you'll see what has happened to some of those, and some of the properties that have been demolished. That would have protected those, and especially from demolition.
Right.
So that would be an area, but I think the thinking was, let's start with one and see how this works in town, and, how it can work, and sort of use it as an example and a prototype. That's typically, and then you see, many towns have multiple historic districts. And so I think they said, let's start with this one, let everybody in the community sort of feel comfortable with this, and then maybe we can look at others. But certainly if certain roads, areas want to talk to their neighbors and say, we'd like to be a local historic district, they certainly could do that. If, actually, the Eustis Estate, where the Historic New England owns the 3 properties, they applied and they wanted to be a local historic district. So they're actually a little historic district in among themselves. So that's actually, but they went through the process, and we approved it as a town because that's what they wanted to impose on themselves. And but they are a local historic district.
Oh, interesting.
And that, yeah.
Thanks.
But yeah.
Okay. Any other comments or questions just in regards to the items?
And I'll work on getting some more specific budget items. Tim is working on a memo, which I'm sure he'll be giving to you, talking about, the funding requests and what those would be able to do. But there are some really important things, such as our zoning codification, that we just don't have the resources in Milton that we would need. We would need to pay an outside consultant. But that was one of the big items that we've been discussing. So.
Okay, well, Chair Hall, thank you so much.
Thank you all
for coming by.
Good questions, and feel free to reach out, obviously through Tom, if anything you think of later at any time, but we'll keep you updated. I think this is great to start early, have these conversations, so we keep the public and keep everyone sort of aware of where we are with things, so.
Well, thank you. We're looking forward to having you back. But again, thank you for this overview of everything you're working on and just some of the positions the board has. And look forward to speaking with you again.
Good, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Yes,
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Okay. Well, that, in terms of timing, I think it works out. We have discussion now. And the agenda is on the board. If anybody wants to maybe start the discussion, if there's anything of interest. I'm really interested, I kind of commented, I was just really interested on just the new development. And East Milton, there's restaurants that are going to be going in there. You get the fire station, the old fire station, which will become a new fire station, but what's going to go in there, and just like all the new developments. And are we looking at more money for Board of Health, Planning Board, or other? So I mean, I don't know. That's just something maybe just to kick it off.
Enforcement officers, if they could generate revenue, would be, and pay for themselves, basically, might even actually be an added revenue source for the town, if there are in fact so many enforcement discrepancies. I know the city of Boston has done that before, where you come in and your grease trap isn't cleaned, and there's that used to be, you'd get a fine for that, another fine for it, then you'd come in, padlock it. Not expecting that you're going to see all of that in East Milton, but we should have enough enforcement officers to handle the issues that are arising in the town. I don't know if that's ever been studied or not, or whether there's just, it seems anecdotal. But the other side of that, though, is that from a cost-benefit analysis was, if an enforcement officer can go out and, just like police officers write tickets for parking, there's some revenue to offset the cost of having that happen.
Maybe obviously good at some point just to bring the building department in and have a chat with them. They usually do come in and just kind of, they can opine on maybe what they're looking down the pike at. Liz?
So it was very interesting when Meredith mentioned this technology that I didn't know we had. That's the second piece of technology that I've learned through being on the Warrant Committee that Milton has paid for, but we're not using because we don't have the right trained people. So I'm curious what else.
What's the first one?
Oh, I will tell you all about it later, but I learned about it from the, when we talked to the police chief. But it's interesting because I think this one in particular, we're outsourcing. It had to do with like the traffic cameras, but anyway, so I think it's interesting that we're outsourcing something that, right, like she said, maybe if we were to bring it in-house, I don't know how the financials would look, but if they were able to just run scenarios, that might be a great tool. So I thought that was really interesting, and I don't know how to find out what other technology are we sitting on that we could be using to, I mean, both of them were actually related to traffic, to combat some of these issues. And in this case, maybe save a little bit of money too. So I don't know, I just thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I also am passionate about traffic. The inability to leave my house after 2 o'clock and 2:30 in the afternoon.
I have the same issue.
Yeah, it's just, it's crazy. I'm wondering, though, if, we don't understand the problem already, which is there's just too many cars coming through the town.
Yeah, not even from here.
And, it's not Milton residents. It's people shooting out of the city and just getting stuck in every lane, and they've learned that Route 138, Will Avenue was a great cut through to get to 95, 93, the other way. And, you keep finding ways to get out there, but it's ridiculous. And it's just, I don't know, we could model it, but it's not going to say that the issue is how do you get fewer cars coming through the town? Yeah.
I think that's MBTA, or that is the thought, is you have more residence options, so you don't have to have commuters, but it's a generational problem.
It is.
Genie's out of the bottle.
Oh, yeah, no, I don't think there's.
Yeah, these things probably send people through Milton.
Waze does, that's exactly
Well,
what happens.
I just want to just as a comment, I attended a traffic meeting probably 7 or 8 years ago up at the library.
Yeah.
The representative from Mass Dot was there.
Yeah.
Their goal was to get cars off the highway.
Right.
There was all talk about up by the Trailside Museum.
Yeah.
And Mass Dot said, that's great. because we want cars off the highway. It improves our highway times, it improves our federal funding.
Oh, boy.
Less maintenance.
That's
So,
insane.
and I don't know if this person is still employed by MassDOT, but it was a meeting at the library held by the former town administrator,
Yeah.
and that was said,
Yeah.
that if they can get cars off the interstates, then that's a good thing. And that was, remember they used to block exits off?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's
Yeah.
part of it. It's get the cars off. And so that's what I wanted to add. I think
Yeah.
someone else?
I think if he,
Oh, Ron, I'm sorry.
As we think about suggesting resources and people and hiring, I wonder if we need to have Nick in these discussions, because we don't hire, right? We're not the administration, we don't run these departments. But I think he would be a great person to have come share these thoughts with us, because I think he may have hiring plans, or he may have specific funding requests that could impact staffing. So I don't know, maybe that's something we can have a meeting with him and just get his thoughts on. Are there needs from these changes that are on his, radar that he thinks, oh, when these laws go into effect, we'll have a lot of need from the building department or whichever department, and he's going to propose hiring in the future. I don't know if it's immediately this year or it's 3 years down the road.
Yeah.
There should be some long-term staffing plan.
No, I think that's a good thing, and we will have Nick back in, and we'll make sure we talk about that.
I thought a good idea was the hiring somebody to write grants for the town. I always wondered about that. Meredith mentioned it. And possibility with the state, other grants, maybe we're missing stuff. Could be, that's an income generator. Could be federal grants you could be able to get, like sustainability grants or et cetera, climate change things that are out there with the government. Opportunity.
Jim?
Yeah, I want to go back to the traffic planner that
Oh,
these
yeah, I'm
guys talked
sorry, I
about.
missed you.
No, that's totally fine. First of all, it's not totally obvious to me. It sounds like we own the software and we're hiring a consultant to come use it. It's not completely obvious to me if we should hire someone 40 hours a week to do it, maybe train one of our already people to do it, or if it's fine to keep bringing in a consultant, or maybe look to our big brothers in Quincy and Braintree and see if they have somebody who can do it that we can pay. So it's not obvious to me if we should hire a new person for that or not, but what I'm thinking of is if we're gonna, and we don't know if we are, if we're gonna be going to the taxpayers this year and say, we're suggesting an override, we want the taxpayers to have tangible things that they can get excited about and they can see a benefit about. There'll be lots of things in an override budget that people in this room will get excited about, but maybe the man on the street would not get excited about. But if we can, and this gets what Peter said, not only hiring a traffic consultant, but then what tangible results do we expect that traffic consultant to produce? If they just study it and say, yep, it's bad, well, that's not exciting. But if we can, if the idea is that we can tell the taxpayers, we'll hire a traffic consultant, and these are the kinds of things, we can't predict the future, but what might we get out of it? That could be a really big selling point, and maybe we could think about that a lot when looking at the override. What can we, really tell people, this is a tangible thing that will improve your lives if you vote for this override, or you don't, you choose either way. That sort of turned into a ramble, but that's sort of my thoughts about that.
That's good.
What could we possibly get, though, from a traffic study? That could say, well, we have to, so I talked to Nick about this 2 weeks ago, and my 10-year-old son at the time said, Mom, traffic is horrible. I don't understand. Let's put tolls on the exits. So if you get off an exit on Squantum Street, or Granite Ave, and you're in the town, and you get back on at Bryan Ave, because you wanted to miss the slowdown for a quarter mile, and you leave the town, you have to pay a toll because you got back on within 15 minutes. And then the state can have 75% of the toll and the town can keep 25%.
He's a new consultant.
it's like,
So how do we do this? He said, you can't.
no, you can't.
So it kind of goes with my, let's put cameras on all the blinky lights and ticket the cars that are speeding on Randolph Ave and Reesdale Road and Brook Road, so that we collect money, but we can't, because we can't take pictures of the cars.
Right. What you need is the technology they use in golf carts when you get too close to the green. And so like it identifies you as a Milton resident, you're allowed to get off in Milton, and if you're not, your car just sits there.
Yeah, we just like geofence the town.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Right.
I mean, can you, I thought, is this something with Waze you could do, like where you can like limit, like not a through traffic or something like that, like you can, like some roads
I
not
think,
through.
I think if you
Because
make
cutting
something
through my road
illegal,
these days-
like if you say, you cannot turn, you know, it's illegal to turn on this
Right.
road, even if you never enforce it, but if you tell Waze, this is an article I read 10 years
Yeah.
ago, so I don't know, but.
Stop signs.
pay
like
kids to report
between Quincy and
accidents.
Milton.
And
might
all-
make it
all
like-
that.
Yeah,
Just point to Milton.
that's right, every time.
I'm sorry,
No, yeah.
what did, I didn't hear what you said, Brian.
Like, if you would- like, on my street or the next street, like Plymouth Ave,
Yeah.
people are cutting through from Quincy. And if you put a stop sign at the end of that street, which I asked that once, that would at least slow it down, so maybe Waze would just like knock it out as an option for some
Right. Or if you
algorithm
talk to
that
your
they have.
neighbor Liz,
Yes,
you too will have speed bumps.
no speed bumps. I don't-
I'm
They won't get speed bumps, although I'd be happy to help you if you wanted them. But yes, your neighbors don't want speed
I
bumps
hate
over there.
I know.
Well, it just
Right.
reroutes traffic from one road to another,
Yeah.
yours or ours or something, you know, it's like, that's
I
the
could-
issue.
Well, I'm
It's
not
actually
sure.
rules
Just to
on where you can
reiterate,
put
there,
speed
we're
bumps
not
in.
allowed to take camera, like, pictures, right? I kind of find that interesting because near, like, if you look at Milton where it's bordering Hyde Park, you know how, like, when you go past Precinct 1, but kind of across, I don't know the lights, but it's kind of like if you were gonna go on the way, down to Blue Hills, like, Owens Pond, there's an area where they actually have cameras, but for people that might litter. And so I kind of find that interesting if there's like a loophole around that.
Oh, I need to know.
Yeah,
exactly where that
I-
is.
Town council.
Yeah, town council, I don't want to opine on chapter 90 and like talk about it, but there are strict ideas about operating a motor vehicle, and if there's an offense, essentially, police need to observe you as the operator on a public way in the vehicle, and, you know, whatever infraction that occurs, speeding, you know, it has to be human. It has to be a human element. Some jurisdictions, you know, Midwest and stuff, they don't have that, but Massachusetts, like most laws that we have are pretty strict as to, at least, you know.
Because I've noticed that when I've been around that area, they have like a speed limit as well as also, you know, they just literally have a camera for people that might litter and the fine. So I always thought if there was like a way around things, if we're
Yeah.
really looking to go after that goal.
Well, I know there's a lot of talk in the state about similar things like this, like, you know, tolling and, you know, all, like, how do we control traffic in general? And they just haven't had a solution to it yet. And like, you know, as Ron was saying, like, you know, MBTA is like, get people to get on the train, you know, and, you know, utilize public transport, because, you know, people are gonna keep buying cars, I think.
Some general thoughts. First, the technology that we own, that's kind of shocking that we have it and nobody knows how to use it, and hopefully
Not shocking.
it was used grants, outside grant funding, not town funds, but the real thought that I had was what I'd love to see every town department present to us on a regular basis is a modernization plan, both short and long term, and make sure that each department has an understanding of the potential impacts of AI, and how it intends to, how it recognizes what it may impact, where they can save money, and what are sort of the real pitfalls that they need to be conscious of. Even if most departments aren't ready to adopt it, it's coming, and towns that aren't prepared are gonna be left behind. So they really, really, really should have a plan, as well as, I think a data digitization plan. And if you think about just shedding paper, what that means in terms of space, freeing up town space in the long term, as well as accessibility of information. And once you digitize that information, all of a sudden it's really incredible what you can do. And when I think about what I've heard over and over, how different departments are taxed in terms of their ability, they're overworked or at capacity. A lot of that is because there's manual process or things that are in place that could be remedied. And when I think about traffic, AI, the implications of that, and why we shouldn't own certain technologies, that is evolving at such an incredible pace. I'm a really strong believer of not owning or hiring things that aren't core to the mission of the organization or the town. Because you have to hire for those competencies, and hiring is in many cases a lot easier than firing. And it's also really expensive. And so that sort of cost-benefit analysis really should be done on anything that has a material impact on the town budget. But I think having a recognition of each department really understanding, and have somebody either coach them through it or have an internal recognition of what AI really means. And I'm not just talking about machine learning, I'm talking about generative AI. What is the impact of that? Is really critical if you want to plan to sort of make a change around it.
Just had a thought there. I think this town, I think it'd be tough to ask department heads to become AI experts.
And they should.
Right, I think more likely you're talking about having a study from a consultant that would come in across all functions, and we would have to have Nick charter that, or somebody has to pay for it. But I can't see a department of 3 people who've been working in the same department for 25, 30 years each also start thinking about AI. I mean, it's just, if we were LA, maybe, in New York City, you have these resources, but here, I think we'd have to get a consultant to say, what are all the technologies that are out there? Come tell us about it, and then present it to the town, and then these departments can hear about it, and there's a sales pitch, and they can say, we're never gonna do that, or maybe let's try it. But I can't, I think it's just too tough for small departments to take that tack on.
Yeah, I think I agree, yes and no. It's a big elephant to eat to undertake a project of that scope on. However, if department heads really understand what are the types of things that can be transformed in their business, even just generating notices or drafting legal documents, what does it mean? Because they don't really understand. Each department head knows their department best, and only those department heads can really think about what does this mean in terms of impact of the work that we do today. And of course, there's going to be bigger process thinking that happens that a consultant needs to be engaged, but I think it's really easy to get department heads thinking about it and present to us what they think the impact is, and refine that knowledge over time. But today I'm thinking about, and I'm new to the committee, but when I think about all the things that I've heard from the different presenters thus far, nobody's really talked about it, and it's actually really kind of shocking to me.
Thank you, both.
Something different to talk about, if that's okay.
Go for it.
All right, so I just wanted to say, I was really excited about the economic development plan that Meredith was talking about. Because to Jay's point, I think these are all things that, a lot of people in Milton can get really excited about. So expanding our tax base so that we have taxes coming from other than property tax, which is the majority. We talked about parking and traffic mitigation, having commercial development on the other side of town on the west side. I know a lot of people that live over there really want that. And then bringing revenue to the town. What I really heard a lot of there was talking about having a lot of community input, which I thought was really great. I know, as Meredith said, I went to the East Milton overlay zoning district, and the survey result, like, people really were engaged,
Yeah.
people really liked it. I don't want to speak for like my whole side of the town, but I think that a lot of people really appreciated the work that went in and, are pretty favorable about the outcome. And so I think that it would be great to kind of be able to portray those as things that, to Jay's point, that we're going to get out of. Maybe not necessitated by the override, but she did say that that was part of the additional money that they're seeking. I know that the MBTA and the ADU and, some of those were a little bit more controversial and a little bit more divisive, and I get that. But I think focusing on these things that the vast majority of people really could get excited about, excited me, so I think that was really great. Especially the ones that would bring kind of revenue in, which I think is important from a budgetary perspective, so I was excited by that.
No, I appreciate it. I think getting people excited about, you'd be surprised, I think we all have, I think what people can get excited about, but I think it's a good point. What can people identify with and get excited about,
Do you recall, I know in the past we've had like a town master plan. Is that like an ongoing strategy that someone maintains?
We do have a master plan that was drafted. We do have a master plan implementation committee, and it is, I can't speak to, is it like a living, breathing document? I would assume it is, and it could be, but it's pretty large. We've cited to it prior, on the Warrant Committee, we've cited to it before, in terms of, but there's one out there, it's available on the town website. It's pretty in-depth. There was this was about 10 years ago, Jay?
About 10 years ago, so I think it might be due to,
It's,
For another,
are they going to do another process?
they might ask to do another one, but I don't know.
Maybe sneak AI in there.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
yeah, there we go.
Traffic and AI.
Appendix B. Yeah.
Yeah, do it.
But it's, I think just generally for members of the committee, like, take a look at it. There was a huge amount of work, and like, you open it up, you'd be surprised. Like, a lot of, like, just even what we're talking about right now, they were talking about then. So, it's just another helpful document for you to look at and get some ideas from. Anybody else have anything they'd like to discuss that we touched base on this evening on the agenda? Comments? Questions maybe for the future? People who would like to see come in to maybe talk about some of these things in addition to the chair of the planning board?
When do you think the local historic district committee study, whatever it's called?
It's going to come on down.
Like, yeah, because, he was here 3 or 4 times now.
I believe the head of our of the Historic District Commission for Milton Village will be before us. He has reached out,
Oh, good.
and we will invite him back to discuss, I think, as Meredith indicated, and as he did in other meetings, that there are some changes that have been made. I know the big thing, we had some issues last year. I know that MPIC, I think, they were a little concerned about maybe a couple of things in there. I know, but I think generally it's something that they're really pushing for town meeting to consider again. I know the fines were an issue last year. They have been on other zoning articles. The fines.
I think the fines and then the next committee. What was their charter? I think there was a serious question of what
That's
can they do
great.
and-
I appreciate that. Yeah, and it was like, who's going to be on it?
Right.
Who's the appointing authority? And
Real questions, I think we.
yeah, and there were a lot of ideas. Like who should be the primary focus.
And I think another unsettled question on that topic was, what do the business owners right now in that area think about it? We heard, I think our guest maybe said they were fine with it, but maybe a member of our committee said, I'm not sure if they are, so I don't know.
Yeah, I think that came up in one of our. I think it was just there's a property owner down there, I think, that has some historical buildings. I think it was just concerned maybe and I'm not, I might not be accurate in this, but just concerned about, if there'd be handcuffs in terms of,
It was not optional.
commercial
I
development.
think that was one thing that came up. There was a question of, is it an opt-in?
yeah.
It was like, no,
Yeah,
you own
yes.
that property, you are gonna be subject to this
Well,
requirement.
yeah, I think logic would dictate, right? A zone is designated, like everyone, like you're on the team or you're not.
But he insisted it was
But,
Optional.
and those are the things that I think, that's a big committee. I think they've worked
you
out. We spent a tremendous amount of time with them. So they are going to come back, Lori, I guess, to answer your question, and we can get that done in short order. Because it's a zoning matter, it's going to be coming up. If they have something ready that they want to push forward for select board approval, it's going to be in February. So that would be another one added to our list. Thank you, Lori. Anybody else have anything?
For the town hall meeting that's gonna be on February, do we ever address like the town, or I don't know how that works out with, because it's my first year.
Yeah, well, actually, it's future scheduling, I guess. We frequently, we comment in the warrant, and there are often times, we haven't seen it much in, I think, the past year or two, but sometimes we're asked direct questions about our comment,
Yeah.
what's in it, why we put it in there. There are other times where maybe something comes up on the floor and we're subject to another vote. We have another vote on the floor. Sometimes we explain why we voted a certain way, but that would flow through me as the chair. So I would speak, and obviously it's, anything we would want to say to town meeting is from the committee.
No worries. I was just curious if it was just, select board, planning board, like warrant committee, they're just all gathered together for, the town as far as, meeting, assembly.
We're up front with
Yeah, we are up front.
Yeah.
So,
Okay,
yeah.
I just wanted to get.
Very
Plan on being
clarification.
here.
Yeah.
So
and-
shower beforehand.
Yeah.
And you'll see, and I think
Bring a
that,
snack.
yeah, that's when, and when we just started and everyone was appointed, go back and try to watch some of those town meetings, especially last year, the year before. And, even members of the public, just give you a good idea of how business is done
Yeah.
on the floor. It's exciting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It is.
I
I
don't
like
know.
it. It is. It's a great, but you'll get to experience it
No, of
front and
course.
center.
I'm looking forward to the scrutiny.
Colorful. It's good like that.
One
Right,
more
yeah,
point.
of course.
Is like, I brought it up during Meredith's speech, but between the ADUs, the MBTA, the 40Bs, that, in my mind, like, they're not having enough parking for all these apartments and stuff. And that's just gonna add parking to the streets, which is gonna kind of cityfy Milton, which I think is a concern. And I don't know if anything the Warrant Committee can do, or, I think there's a big concern about that, and I think it's not probably what most town people would want. I think that's a
Yeah,
concern.
I think that,
Code enforcement.
anyone
officer.
want to comment on?
I would just say we'd have two code enforcement officers and ticket all the street.
I don't think you
parking
can,
cars.
I thought you couldn't do anything about it. Like, if they live in the town and they don't have a parking spot, aren't they allowed to park on the street?
Oh,
You
No.
can get a
No,
permit
like
from the
that.
police department,
Yeah.
yeah.
So you can get around it, and they would. So it's gonna
well, then
become
we'd have
like
to explain to the police that
every
there's no
neighborhood in
permit.
Boston.
Yeah.
That's what it's gonna become.
Well, the permit costs $10,000.
Yeah, no
Well,
permit.
this already exists. I mean, in my area of town, there are lots of multifamilies and not enough driveways. So everyone, myself included, park on the street because there is nowhere else to park.
Right.
yeah,
Which
that's
isn't
not bad.
great. It's not the case in the rest of Milton, but it's not a good situation.
Yeah. Yeah, the overnight parking ban has been in effect for as long as I can remember.
When somebody parks on the street, I call the police and tell them.
But these are something, I think, Brian, that we ask the questions of the speakers as they come in. And I think in the overall, if the situation plays out with a specific article, we as the Warrant Committee can address that in the comment. And it might not come on the floor that day, but I think kind of how I've looked at it is it may start a conversation somewhere, either within the town or a department where, it comes up. So A lot of times we can't effectuate change right then and there through our comment or however we want to address the floor, but sometimes it starts conversations, so it's a good thing, but definitely a problem. Judy.
Thank you. I just wanted to add a comment to the subject of how the warrant committee works at a town meeting. And for some of the newer members that are also town meeting members, may not realize that they can't go to the microphone to speak as a town meeting member, because being on the warrant committee, you're already speaking to an article that's being voted on. So it would be like you'd be double voting, I think, is how it was explained to me at one time. So you could still vote on your little clicker, but you just can't go to the microphone as a town meeting member. Thank you.
Is that a rule, or is it just like a habit?
That was my question. Yeah, is that a rule or is that just an
I would think
expectation?
anyone who's a town meeting member should be allowed to speak, but I think we should respect the role as warrant committee members too, and not have contradicting messaging, because that could be confusing, but I can't imagine we wouldn't be allowed to.
No,
Sure.
any member, elected member of town meeting can speak when recognized by the moderator.
I mean, the moderator has said, don't do this, so what the consequences would it be? Would it be you're not appointed to the warrant committee next year? Would it be, I don't know, he's very firmly asked not to do this. Now, can you point to town meeting time and say, I have the legal right to?
It doesn't say. I've read it. I think maybe, and I don't want to speak for the moderator, but I think it might be sort of why you never have an attorney or a doctor on a jury, because the idea would be that as a member of a warrant committee, people could give it kind of undue weight, your comment. And so maybe the thought is that, right, you have all these opportunities to express your thoughts. We're expressing them, have a vote, and then maybe keep the rest of it to yourself. But I don't know. That's an interesting question. We could ask the moderator.
Yeah, it's a unified voice, you
Yeah.
know, and it's really, you know, I know there was some discussions years ago and about who's voting what on the warrant committee, and but I think that in the history of the town, it's always been, you know, we're a single unit. We disagree in here, but we present a unified front. And of course, like, we are commenting, and people do give it a lot of weight. I think others, you know, I certainly did when I was a town meeting member, brand new. So, but yeah, those are all valid, you know, they're all good points.
Yeah. I think it would be counterproductive, because people would know that person is sitting up at the front of the warrant committee, and then they just got up to the mic. Everybody in the room would know that. And it would just cause, when you've got a room of 250 people trying to do something, anytime you cause a little chaos, it makes things worse. So there's that. It would be noted and remarked upon, and it wouldn't help things.
Text a friend. Tell them.
On a somewhat related note, I learned after the fact that it is not typical for the chair to write the comments without the recommendations for the warrant without the rest of the committee seeing and giving input and sort of agreeing on the final version. And there were certainly some things in the warrant last year that I was not okay with being in there. So do you, Chair, plan on doing things similarly or different from the way the previous chair did the comments from the group? And if we're not ready to discuss this,
Well,
right
it's
now,
just,
that's
I
fine.
would love to have a conversation with everyone about it. I don't want it, it's not on the agenda.
Yeah,
Procedures and stuff, but I hear where you're coming from.
Maybe we could put it on a future agenda.
I think that would be a good idea,
Great,
well in advance of February.
thank you.
write in the comments, everyone wants to volunteer, until you actually have to do it, and then the chair ends up writing it. I'm joking, but a little
You
bit.
can write it, I just want to criticize.
Yeah, exactly. So, but we can have we will, especially for the new members, we will have plenty of time, and we will discuss the procedures and how we're gonna go forward on comment writing.
Going back to scheduling, for the February town meeting, is it just the one that, I understand what the select board said, but are you aware of anything else other than the one thing that's gonna be brought up? Are there other potential warrant? Yes.
Yeah, so it'd be all zoning.
Yes,
So it'd be addition to public schools,
right,
planning board,
yes.
potentially historic district.
Okay. Anything else? No.
Not that I know of now,
Okay.
but stay tuned.
Okay. So,
And then, we're taking, the select board is gonna obviously weigh in on what we actually see.
wonderful.
I trust it would be all of them, but
Were there articles from the last town meeting that got pushed?
Oh, yeah.
The recording? Did we decide on that? I
We
can't
did.
remember.
Passed.
Yeah,
passed,
we
oh.
I don't think there was any.
did. No.
No, it got pushed from December.
It got pushed,
Yeah.
you're right.
Spring.
From
That's what
December
happened.
Oh, that's
to
right,
May.
that's right.
Yeah, that's what happened.
how can you
Good
forget?
memory.
Blocked it out.
Yeah.
Like at Warrant's allowed.
Good memory.
Yeah, there's nothing, but you talking like the 2-year ones that are like, there's nothing that I've been alerted to or I can remember just sitting here right now.
So it'll be easy, you're saying?
No,
Yeah.
One
no.
night, one night?
I think, in terms of the meeting, it's going to be some hot button issues. So I would expect to keep your schedules open for that week. And how the moderator schedule, again, I'm getting off the agenda here, but they'll, usually it's kind of 2 days on, 1 day off, that type of thing.
Unless the high school's already booked.
Yeah, and exactly. Maybe there's a band or a play. We can't do it, but I leave that up to our moderator. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to bring up? No? Okay, in terms of, can I move on? We move on to
I have
future?
one more question, I'm sorry.
Brian, no.
So we had a meeting with the school committee a few weeks ago,
Mm-hmm.
and they were gonna get back to us for some answers, I think, but who did they go to? Did they go to you? Does that come to us? Or?
Let me figure that out.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the point of contact.
Well,
so
maybe
let's,
I'm not trying to nag, I'm just
Oh,
wondering,
no,
at
no.
one point, how does it get back to us?
not at all. Let me, I will reach out and
Yeah.
we'll
Okay.
get some answers. I know there were several things that we asked for.
Would it just come back when they come back?
Yeah, sometimes they just answer.
Oh,
it
When
the
they
That's
come
next
back
day.
to the meeting?
Okay, that's fine.
Anyone else? Okay, in terms of future meetings, we're gonna have the historical commission come in. Like maybe think about MPIC, some other, just kind of asking them what they're planning on. Anything in the fall, anything in February or the annual, any opinions they have. So I'm gonna be reaching out to a few more departments, committees, to add to what we already have. I would ask that you continue to work. Brian had a question for me. You continue to work on your assignments. And if you want to reach out to me via email, I know Jay had like a meeting with Agenda and like, I know him, that group, the government group got together. If you want to just email me and say that you're ready, you're done, you're completed, and you want to then, and then we can talk about how you want to present anything. You don't need to do PowerPoints, handouts that we can put up on the screen, but just kind of inform the committee what you learned. Any ideas you have, the ideas they have, more money, less money, the same, things that other committee, things that maybe we think they need. Meredith Hall was here, she made some comments, about the building department. Maybe they need some help. So when you're ready, and I'd like to maybe block it, like maybe 3 or 4, department meetings, like where the people in the subcommittee present, give the information, we have a nice discussion, questions, answers, and then we bring that department or committee in. and then we are all well-armed, to ask the best questions, and figure out what they need, what their ask is, if it's anything, so. I think that, I feel as if though I was not as well situated as other people were who were doing individual work. I just think that if you share all that information you have, it'll make for a better discussion, and I think we can really drill down on the issues and the money issues that anybody may have, and answer the questions for the town. If we need to ask for more, we got to ask for more, and this is why. And like Jay said, get people excited about it. So I will be in touch over email. I think I'm hoping maybe we could get something next week, if not the week after. And I think at that point, I think would probably be, which is Thanksgiving. So that's right. Yeah. So that'll be December. So I expect our next meeting in December. At this point, does anybody have any concerns about the committee work? Are we making contact with everybody? An issue? No. If you're having an issue with information or just reaching out, you can contact me on email, and I'll reach out to the necessary people and get things moving. Okay. Anything else? Okay. Well, anybody have a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn?
Any second? We are adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you.